Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast. Using my sportscasting background, I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players to gain more insight on what makes this team go. As the Detroit Lions enter a new gritty era, we'll look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In this episode, we preview the Detroit Lions Week 7 matchup with the Baltimore Ravens. What do we know about Baltimore? What are we expecting from each team? And what do we view as vitals for success for the Lions? In addition to our usual game preview, we hear from a reporter who covers the Ravens regularly. We'll talk about met expectations so far on the season, as well as areas of success and concerns for Baltimore.
Hi, everyone. This is Herman Moore, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
I'm joined today by Pete Gilbert, a member of the Baltimore Ravens broadcast team. Pete also anchors weekends for WBAL TV 11. Pete, thank you so much for making time in your schedule to speak with me about this Week 7 game between the Lions and the Ravens.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, Pete, this is the second time the Lions and Ravens will square off in the Dan Campbell, John Harbaugh era. Lions fans might like to forget that first one. That was that 66-yard Justin Tucker field goal, which came after maybe there should have been a delay of game penalty, but that was 2 years ago. So let's let that go, because this Detroit team is different and this Baltimore team is a little different than that one. So let's talk about how some of these additions and changes have affected the Ravens team. This offseason, they brought back Lamar Jackson. That was a very heavily followed saga there. And along with bringing him back, they signed Odell Beckham Jr., Nelson Aguilar for the wide receiving core, and they drafted Zay Flowers. And so I have to ask, with those additions, along with Mark Andrews in the tight end game, is this passing attack what you had hoped it would be?
We see flashes of what it can be. It hasn't consistently been that yet. And I think that goes along with, you bring in a new offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, and there's a lot of just the whole approach to it has been different, what he has done with Lamar. Before, under Greg Roman, it was you can describe, he would get the play in, and it was a very long string in the huddle to deliver out, get up to line, and he really wasn't checking or audibling. Very little of that going on. Now it's designed to be much shorter, allowing Lamar to use more of his vision at the line and make quick adjustments and audibles. And so that process, I think overall undoubtedly will benefit them in the long run. It's been a little slow in coming, but we see that the potential really is there. Also under Greg Roman, there was a lot more freedom for Andrews, a lot more option route, a lot more freedom for him to freelance. And some of that has been removed to keep everyone more in line and on the same page. But the ability to throw the ball outside, it's funny. If you ask Ravens fans about the idea of a screen to a running back and it being successful or being used consistently at all, hadn't happened for 15 years. I mean, just not, no matter who was, it just wasn't a thing. We're starting to actually see that now and seeing success out of that, throwing the ball outside the numbers, and still then finding Mark Andrews down the seam. So there's a lot more variability, a lot more potential in the passing game. And Lamar is throwing the ball as well as he has ever thrown it. His accuracy, the mechanics that he has worked so hard on to refine have allowed him to put the ball in places we just hadn't seen before this year. So that's been exciting to watch. It hasn't all come together yet. And so that's what kind of got to wait and see. And I think the potential is there for it, but it hasn't all come together for a whole game. They're really good early on. They struggled later in games. That's been kind of the offensive MO to this point.
All right, so even though it's a work in progress, you see potential there that it could take it to a level that the offense hasn't been at in recent years?
Oh, no question. It was, 2019 was obviously their high water mark. Lamar was a unanimous MVP and, had total of combined like 46 touchdowns between passing and running. And at that point, because it was so new, you're running this read option that just wasn't in the NFL. When you threw off of it, because then everyone got so focused on trying to figure out where the ball was in the run game, he had guys running free, wide open. So now, that's no longer there. They don't have the running game really either that has been quite as dominant as what we've seen. So that has allowed the passing game to be bottled up a little bit more. It can't play off it quite as much as it has in the past. But we finally starting to see it's been a little harder to judge too because they've been so injured. You were missing 2 starters in the offensive line. You were missing wide receivers all over the field. So finally, like last week, we saw, all right, they had their starting offensive line all there. You had Odell Beckham Jr., Nelson Aguilar, Zay Flowers. They were all there for the first time. And so, okay, you see where that how efficient it can be. They got in the red zone though, and they just bottled down. And it looked some of which felt like play calling was conservative, run Gus Edwards, and then trying to make a play. Kind of thought Gus would be a real good red zone running back because he's a hammer, but he has not had any holes. They were very good early in the red zone, largely because Lamar on designed runs they couldn't stop him. They have not, I think 1 for their last 9 in red zone touchdowns. So they struggled. If they figure that out, I mean, they'll get back to 35 points a game because they're still doing that and still getting 25 a game while struggling in the red zone. Because as you may recall, they do have a very good kicker. That helps for sure.
Well, let's talk about the running game a little bit. Losing J.K. Dobbins for the season was a huge blow. You had re-signed Justice Hill at running back. You guys have Gus Edwards. Lamar Jackson is the team's leading rusher at this point, but you alluded to the fact that even in the red zone there, Edwards wasn't finding a lot of holes. Talk to me about the running game. Is it more on the running backs? Is it on the offensive line? Is it a combination of things?
It's certainly a combination, and there's a lot more zone running than what they had done under Greg Roman, which was a lot more, man going to find a guy specifically. There's your target. So and when you don't play in the preseason, you're which none of the starters did, and which I don't blame John Harbaugh after watching him lose countless starters to start the 2021 season. They just a totally different approach to it. So you have a new scheme and you didn't have the preseason, and then you had guys hurt in season. So it just, again, it's a little bit hard to judge, but it has not been that when they've lined up and the other team knows that they're going to run, and the situation calls for it. They have not for the last several years, they still were successful doing so. And they have not been as successful doing that. And it really hurt losing J.K. Dobbins, he's a special player. And it's heartbreaking to watch him go down again and again and to have such significant season-ending injuries. So Gus Edwards, who also had his knee was just tore 2 or 3 ligaments in it 2 years ago. And he's good. Again, he's not the same burst and explosiveness that we did see before the injury. And Justice Hill, lots of flashes. But he tore his Achilles also. He's coming back from that and has had trouble at times holding onto the ball. So you're kind of looking around and figuring out what are they going to do? They have Melvin Gordon, who has been, cast aside, and he has shown a couple of nice bursts, but he's not someone on which you're going to rely. So I think the running backs have not allowed them, they're not the high level that they had hoped they would be. There's a lot of talk and hope here in Baltimore that somehow they'll trade for Saquon Barkley coming up at the, before the break, which would be, that would alter things dramatically, I think, if you could add someone of that dynamic caliber into the mix.
I think that would send a little bit of an earthquake through the NFL if that happened.
It really would, because they could because of their ability, what we've seen, in the passing game, if you can really then run the ball, it would be fun to watch.
Well, let's talk about the injury thing then. You've kind of brought that up a little bit. Lions fans know the Lions team has suffered from a number of injuries, but they're not the only ones. You've alluded to it. What have the Ravens been dealing with?
So they missed your left tackle, Ronnie Stanley, Pro Bowler, $100 million. He's only played in half the games. You missed Marlon Humphrey, your $100 million corner. He has been out. He just came back. He's played 2 games now, had surgery on his foot in August. And you had Morgan Moses at right tackle. He has some sort of pectoral injury that, we feared would be a season ender. But this guy who had played 130 or so straight games coming into the season, he only missed a game, which was pretty remarkable. So you mentioned the running back there. Odell Beckham Jr. missed 3 games. At wide receiver, let's see, and they're still missing Tyus Bowser, Adafe Owe, and David Ajabo at outside linebacker. They're missing Marcus Hamilton has missed some time at free safety, who was one of their significant free agent acquisitions before last season. He hurt his hamstring again. He's not going to play, I don't imagine, this week. So yeah, it's a lot. There have been a lot of guys going down. Health-wise, they're still missing some, but They added in Jadeveon Clowney late and Kyle Van Noy, and they have both. Jadeveon Clowney, I can't believe how well he is playing for someone who the Browns cast aside. He, whatever he struggled there with the franchise, and maybe somewhat of a limited role opposite of Myles Garrett. I'm not sure that he has been unbelievable. He had 9 pressures last week, and he's got 3.5 sacks on the season. He's been unbelievable for, he's 30 years old now, but he looks like he's 25. So that's been a real bright light for them. And they brought in Van Noy. He's been there for 2 weeks, and he's been impactful as well.
The Lions know about Kyle Van Noy because he started in Detroit, drafted by a different regime, and then found success after leaving our area. So even with injuries, even with the work in progress from the offense, the Ravens are still 4-2. They're leading the AFC North. And so they're getting some things done. They're finding ways to win at times. Coming into this matchup with the Lions, a team that's 5-1, a team that's been banged up, but it also has found ways to win. How do you think the Ravens are viewing the Lions?
With a lot of respect. I think that John Harbaugh, I really admires Dan Campbell, the way he goes about. They're football guys, right? I mean, that's just kind of they're of that same cloth. And so the way that Dan has clearly developed the culture to the buy-in, right? That's been one of the biggest problems, right, forever, right? Getting the buy-in behind an idea. And so he has the right approach, and he's gotten the guys on board. So that's how I think the message that John Harbaugh is certainly sharing to his team. And there are offensively lots of weapons out there. Jared Goff playing as well as he ever has, and defensively they play such a physical brand that it will be. I'll be very curious to see how what the Ravens can do in the ground game, matching up against the physicality of what we've seen out of Detroit so far. If they get pushed back in that one, it would be challenging. I will say the Cleveland Browns have arguably, I think, statistically the best defense right now in the NFL, and the Ravens kind of pushed them around a little bit at times. So that was, coming into this week and facing a similar, I think, kind of defense, kind of encouraging for Baltimore's side of things. But I think it's the best game of the week. And I know the Ravens are really happy to be home. They had 3 straight road games. The last, 2 of them in division, and the last of which was in London against an old rival that plays a physical brand of football. So they're kind of like, there's a little bit of a deep sigh, but you can't, they know you can't relax at all, because the Lions, who maybe you look back, in the offseason thinking, they'll, all right, maybe that's one you kind of pencil in as a W just based on history. Well, they know that's not going to be the case. They cannot just show up and play and get a win. And that is undoubtedly the case.
All right, well, we talked a little bit about the offense. The defense for Baltimore has actually been quite solid. You gave some props to Cleveland, but Baltimore's defense is right up there as well. And Baltimore's had that reputation for, it seems like, 2 decades now, just having great defensive football. Some years have been down years. This doesn't seem to be a down year. So how is the defense? And I guess if Baltimore is going to win this game, what do the Ravens need to do?
So what is really solidified defensively as far as having an anchor and the communicator, it's Roquan Smith. And they traded for him midseason last year, and he played well last year for sure. But it was still, he's trying to figure out how to fit in midseason, what he did in the offseason and in terms of leadership, and he was in Baltimore relentlessly and at every opportunity, every OTA, everything he could be at, he was there. He's played at even a better level, I think, than they could have hoped. Not just in what he's done on the field, but his running mate in Patrick Queen. Queen's a guy who was a first-round pick out of LSU in 2020. They didn't pick up his 5th-year option, and because he showed flashes but wasn't consistently that guy. And he's now that guy, which has been really remarkable to watch those two together. That they are such playmakers, and because they've missed out on some of the, their edge rushers they don't have, they found ways to get those two to attack the quarterbacks against the pass. The way they have learned, their chemistry they have in blitzes is incredible. The D line and Michael Pierce, in terms of, running the ball up the middle, Jahmyr Gibbs, if he runs into 58, he's not going to go anywhere. Pierce is just such a mountain of a man who still is pretty quick. So I would say defensively, the secondary is a weakness, but it's their weakness if you're going to rank them. But it's not really a weakness. They're pretty solid, top to bottom in that regard.
All right, so then if Baltimore is going to win this game against the Lions, what do the Ravens need to do?
So in the games that they have lost this year, it has been 4th quarter mistakes They've jumped out. They've scored first in every game they've played, and they've looked very good early on. They have screwed things up in the fourth quarter, whether it be not getting the job done in the red zone or turning the ball over late in the game. And so, Lamar Jackson, again, playing at a very high level, does have more turnovers than they want to see, for sure. And they've had fumbles. They just haven't taken care of the ball as well. And that cost them against the Colts. They also, kind of had a miscue in communication and coaching. They cost them a game. They should have beat Indianapolis. And then in Pittsburgh, they had 8 drops. If they catch 4 of those, they win the game. It's not even a contest. So it's the mistakes that they've made to themselves. No team has come out and just outplayed them yet through 6 weeks. The 4 games they won, you would have looked at and said they should have won those 4. And the 2 they lost, they really outplayed them, but gave it away. So if they manage not to give it away, you would say that the Ravens should get the win.
All right, well, the Lions, I don't think, are taking the Ravens lightly at all on this one. I look at this as the Lions' toughest game since weeks 1 and week 2 when they played Kansas City and Seattle. So if the Lions are going to go on the road and win this game, what does Detroit need to do to get that victory?
So I think the chunk plays that the Ravens have not allowed defensively. So if you can manage to get, multiple big plays, the Ravens defense has allowed, stuff underneath, but they have made you have long drives by and large. And so if you can find a way to get chunk plays and get that turnover, not just, and maybe try and take a lead. Lamar, we don't know what they look like trying to play from behind yet because they haven't. I think if you can get a 10-point lead, I don't know if they're built for that or not. So we, go ahead and go up early on Baltimore, which would be something new. And that maybe it might rattle them a little bit because it's just not something they have experienced thus far. There is one other note of interest for this game this week. Terrell Suggs will be going into the Ring of Honor. So he'll be there before the game, hyping up the crowd. He's the halftime ceremony and is one of the most ferocious defenders in Ravens history. That's just a little bonus that they may have to, the Ravens, the crowd will be a little extra amped than maybe it would on just a normal occasion.
Yeah, and as you said, it's one of the best games of the week, so I think a lot of people are getting up and getting excited for this. It's prediction time. You can predict anything. It doesn't have to be the score. It doesn't have to be the winner. Just anything that you think you might see in this game.
That's a great question. I think Geno Stone, who I haven't mentioned yet, he was a 7th-round safety out of Iowa a couple years ago, was forced into action due to injury. He has 3 interceptions so far. Somehow this kid who was on the practice squad at one point, who was, didn't make a team at one point, has become a kind of a quiet playmaker. I expect Geno Stone to add to his interception total. He's had a couple of returns that look like that might go for a score. I think this week he gets one and gets a pick 6 at the house and at home.
All right, Pete, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights, your thoughts. I'm actually flying out this weekend to see the game in person as well. I think it's going to be one of the better matchups of the week.
I'm really looking forward to it. It'll be a great atmosphere. I think the weather is supposed to turn. It's going to rain Saturday. It should be gone by Sunday. So no issues with that. And get the best out of both teams. Really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks again, Pete. And now, folks, for the rest of our Lions versus Ravens preview. I'm joined by Coach Jerry Angers, named Michigan High School Coach of the Year, as well as Coach of the Week by the Detroit Lions. He's also mentored numerous players to the college level and some all the way to the NFL. Good to have you here as always, Coach.
Oh, great to be here, especially this week, Matt.
Oh, this is going to be a good one. And as we get into it, just a reminder to those listeners, please hit that subscribe or like button as you're listening. It's helping us build momentum just like the Detroit Lions are building momentum. It seems every week more and more people are taking notice. And after last week's road victory, everybody's really starting to look at us going into this Baltimore game.
That's great to hear. It should be a fun one, that's for sure. Playing over there in Maryland. Be a good one to go see, wouldn't it?
Oh, man, I can only imagine. Maybe. Yeah, sounds like something that we may have to talk about. Well, let's start talking about the Baltimore Ravens. They're a little bit different from last year. Their wide receiving core is much improved. They have a new offensive coordinator. It's still a work in progress. The defense is looking pretty solid. We'll get to some of those stats. So what do we expect out of Baltimore coming into this game? Coach, the Ravens are a team in a very tough AFC North battle. They're in first place, but just one game separates first place and last place in that division. a little bit different than the NFC North. Oh, and by the way, that last place team is the Cincinnati Bengals. So the Ravens don't have a lot of room for error. What are you expecting out of them?
Well, I think that's every game's important for them, especially because when they start getting into league play, their home and away games against as good as that division is. And so, they take a game like this and it's a home game and they just come back from a win. And, it's going to be something that they need to approach and take care of. It's not a huge loss if they lose it because it's not a league play, but they still got week in and week out. They have to play tough opponents, and they have a tough one this week.
Well, and their defense coming into this one is actually ranked second in the NFL, and that actually caught me by surprise because we know the reputations for the Ravens defenses, but there's been some lulls in that. But over the last 20 years, they've had a pretty good defense. They're 10th in rushing defense, second in passing defense, fourth in points allowed. And that kind of caught me off guard. And I did a little looking. And other than the Bengals, though, they haven't played any offensive juggernauts. And I believe Joe Burrow was a bit banged up in that game. Now, that's not to take anything away from their defense, but I think this might be the most explosive passing attack they faced. But they still have a very good defense that might even be better than the Buccaneers defense we faced last week, which was solid.
I think so. I mean, I was kind of looking at those two. They're only allowing 15.2 points per game. One of the ones that stuck out to me, they're second best against the red zone offense. They have 11 different players with sacks, 4 guys with 3 or more. I mean, that's amazing. Thinking about, when we talk about injuries, they have 2 of their D linemen, 2 of the younger guys that didn't play. That aren't playing this year, or they're hoping to come back this year, yet they filled them in. They picked up Clowney, that's a huge. They picked up Vinoy, that's a huge one. And, they do have, talk about another injury, but their safety, but their other safety stepped in and done a great job for it. So, I mean, I look at, you look at the defense, 11 different players with sacks. I mean, that's just something that's amazing. And then 4 players with 3 or more. So, you're not going to double. If you're going to double, somebody's going to be let loose. And so, I think that's the biggest thing. And we know the Ravens have always been a very good defensive team. They kind of set their goals and throughout the season on to have the best defense. And when they won the Super Bowl, I think they had a pretty good defense. So that's something that we'll look out for.
Yeah, and you said it, with all those different players having sacks on the team, it shows you they're not just 1 or 2 player dependent. They're a very balanced defense, something I think the Detroit Lions can relate to a little bit. If we look over to the other side of the ball, though, and look at the Ravens offense, they are ranked 11th in total offense, 16th in points scored, 5th in rushing, and 24th in passing. And I think those numbers don't probably tell the story very well, though, because Lamar Jackson is the team's leading rusher, and he's also thrown the ball well, but the team has had some drops. So what I'm getting at is their rushing game might not be as good as that 5th shows from a traditional standpoint, because Lamar Jackson's been having to carry a lot of the weight there with some injuries, but also the passing game might be better than people are thinking, because Lamar's had some drops and he's had some key players out who he looks to be getting back into the groove. So this offense could be a little bit of a mystery.
Oh, it is. I mean, here's a couple of things you want to think about. New OC, like you mentioned earlier, Todd Monken. He's been around for years. He led Georgia's offense last year. He's kind of spread it out a little bit more so that the Ravens don't have as many guys in the box to stop the run. I think the biggest thing is Lamar is turning himself into a true quarterback. A true quarterback. He looks to throw first. He scrambles and moves around second to see if he can find an open receiver, and then he takes off when he has to. Which in the past would have been a little bit different. Look at that run he had the other night, that 3-4 yard scramble down near the goal line. I think he made 3 or 4 different guys miss to get in, to get the first down. So, I think you're correct. They have. I mean, Andrews has got 7 catches with 15 or more yards. He's a great tight end that leads the league. Then you got OBJ and you got Flowers and is it Aguilar? I mean, they got some dudes out there, and that was the biggest thing off season was, what did the Ravens want to do, Matt? They talked about first of all, they got Jackson that really small contract. but they got bodies to go with them. And that was one of the biggest things that he wanted. So, they're scary. And like you said, now you're 6 weeks into the Todd Monken's offense. And things are going to start to change. They haven't put two good halves together. That was the other thing that I noticed. And so those are things, if all four quarters come together, it could be pretty scary. And, thank God we've got a pretty good defense to hopefully offset some of those things.
I agree with you on all those accounts, Coach. I think this is the most talented team the Lions will face since those first 2 weeks of the season against Kansas City and Seattle. And not to take anything away from the other opponents, but Kansas City, Seattle, and the Ravens all had great expectations coming into this season. So knowing that this is a tough opponent, even though it's an AFC opponent, and it doesn't matter in the conference standings as far as the tiebreakers and stuff, what do we expect out of the Detroit Lions coming into this game, Coach?
The big thing with that is I think you're going to see them try to establish the run. I mean, we threw the ball a ton last week. We had an injury. We can go into the injury thing. It's part of the NFL. Everybody's got injuries. And, we adjusted whether they were, it could have been, what does the box look like? Were they trying to outman us in the box so that we couldn't run the ball? Did they, or did we change our game plan because Monty went down? We wanted to get the rookie who just got off suspension involved. So I think that's one of the things is I think we're gonna see a balanced attack again with the Lions. I think they're gonna try to establish a run because you got to establish a run to slow that pass rush down. With the Ravens, with the pass rush that they have right now, like we talked about, the 11 different guys with sacks, they're going to want to slow those guys down and try to run the ball against them. And control the clock because we don't want Jackson with the ball in his hands too many series because that guy is scary. We all know that he's if not the scariest quarterback out there, he's second behind Mahomes on guys that can make things happen with their legs or with their arms.
Where you talked about trying to control the clock a little bit and have more of a balanced attack. I agree. I think the 44 passes were out of necessity, not out of original game plan. The Lions are fourth in total offense, fourth in points scored, ninth in rushing, fifth in passing right now, and they've done a great job of spreading the ball around. I didn't mention it in the game recap against Tampa, but if you didn't see the Josh Reynolds adjustment to the catch over the middle where he reached back, I mean, it just goes to show you this receiving core is kind of rounding itself out right now. It's starting to take form. It's looking like what you and I were hoping it was going to look like back when we were at Lions training camp and thinking, what could this receiving core be? And so I think the key is going to be right. Can we get the rushing game going knowing we won't have David Montgomery? And can that be balanced with the passing game?
Yes. And I think, Gibbs comes back. We saw what Reynolds can do for us. He's going to give us every minute, that we watched that clip today when the Lions said, are we going to be sick to our stomach if we lose that guy? And you look at, from 2 weeks ago when Monty sent him back in the game to score a touchdown to him having probably I think going to be one of the top two or if not the top block in the NFL this year on Spring and St. Brown. And, and then we have that receiving core, St. Brown, like he said, I decided to make a play, see if I could go score. And he made it. I mean, he was bottled up with three guys, had great position on him. And what happened? But here come the Lions flying down, receivers coming down and pinning defenders so we can get to the edge to get in the end zone. So, we may extend our running game with the short passing game. Same concept, just throwing the ball out in the flats to Gibbs or Reynolds, and even with St. Brown or the screen game. So so it may not look the exact same amount of rushing attempts as well as passing attempts, but it's still going to be balanced on the depth that we throw the ball. That's just my feeling on what I think they're going to try to do with the Ravens.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a total team effort again because this Ravens team is no joke. The offense is as good as it is. They're going to face a pretty stiff test here. And the defense is going to have a pretty good test on its hands. They are seventh in total defense, the Lions are. Number one in rushing defense. back to that spot after that impressive performance last week. 18th in passing, 9th in points allowed. And so here's the thing. They're going to try and keep that running game in check, but Lamar Jackson is the type of quarterback that has historically given the Lions fits. Now, they've done a pretty good job so far this year against Patrick Mahomes, Geno Smith, even Baker Mayfield, who can be a little mobile, keeping them in their pocket. But the Lions defense will be tested because they are going up against a talented offense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's, you go back to Lamar, Mahomes and with those quarterbacks, they don't have that true speed that Lamar has and that true ability to make people miss like Lamar has. So we're definitely gonna have to stay in our rush lanes. I was looking at their red zone, let's go the Ravens red zone offense and that concept. And they've been having a tough time scoring over the last 2 weeks. They're like 20% last week and 25% scoring in the red zone last 2 weeks. And, people are saying, oh my God, their red zone's bad. Why are they not taking chances? Why are they not using trick plays? Why do they not go for it on fourth down? Well, why do they not go for it on fourth down? Because they have a guy that is automatic going to kick it through the uprights. And Tucker, the best kicker in the NFL, probably in NFL history, and they rely on their defense to withstand only scoring 3 points. So that's the thing is, and so they play team football just like we do, and we're just gonna have to make sure we stay in our rush lanes and put pressure on Lamar so that he can't complete to that great receiving core he has, and if we get the pressure on him, we better make sure we're in our lanes so he doesn't run to move the sticks.
It really was that pass rush in those front seven that probably changed the outcome of that game last week, because there were some pass deflections that we pointed out were crucial, or they could have been huge gains. And there was times that Baker was off target because he didn't have all of the comfortableness in the pocket because that front seven was getting the job done. And so that's going to be important for them to step up and continue to do what they did last week.
No, for sure. And I think, even those passes that Baker missed, the couple deep balls that he missed, he overthrew the guy. He's done when you're uncomfortable, oh my God, I wish he could have that one back. Oh, he normally hits that. Well, when you're uncomfortable and you can't get out of those pass lanes, to step up in the pocket to get your feet underneath you, to really let the ball go downfield. There's a concern with it, and I think that's one of the things that we can do with Lamar and try to keep him in that pocket. And again, he's making some great throws. He's throwing the ball better than he ever has in his career. We talk about him all the time in my fantasy group, because there are 3 Raven fans in that fantasy group, and we're always telling them that Lamar's they're not allowed to play 2 running backs in the fantasy league. They have to have 1 quarterback, and of course they take offense to that. Well, Lamar's a quarterback right now who could become a running back at any time.
Yeah, he's going to be a very, very dangerous player to have to play against, and arguably the second best quarterback we have faced this season. Before we get into predictions later on, let's talk about the major storylines around the Detroit Lions and anything that might be unexpected by either team as well. Let's just start with the injury to David Montgomery. We know that he's expected to miss some time. Dan Campbell did not say how long, but he hinted and said, do you think he's going to be out a little bit? But he didn't think IR, but we don't know. More information comes out every day. I would not expect to see him play this week or next week against the Raiders, because then the Lions have their bye week after that. And so that means if he's not playing, you already know Bam Knight went on IR. That means you have Craig Reynolds. You've got Jahmyr Gibbs, who's hopefully coming back for this game. And then you've got Ozigbo, who you just signed. And, oh, by the way, the Lions just added Mohamed Ibrahim to the practice squad. If you remember, he's the undrafted free agent out of Minnesota. I know you know that, Coach. I'm just reminding the listeners here. And so he was with the Lions in training camp and whatnot, but did not make the final 53-man roster. So that's where the Lions sit in running back right now. How are you feeling about that, Coach?
Again, I don't, we each week we go in and we're going, oh my God, we're missing this guy. But this team just continues to step up and make plays for each other. And I think guys step up. Craig Reynolds he steps up. The backs that are coming that we're gonna have in there. Gibbs comes back, he's gonna make some plays. We can change and throw the ball 40 times a game if we have to. That's the biggest thing. But we can focus on our tight ends or go double tights or run some trick plays. That's the thing about them is, I get concerned with it, but then again, I look at the long run, which is what the Lions do all the time. How many, Vitae could have probably played last week, but they sat him again. Monty can play against the Raiders, but the Lions are looking in the long haul that, hey, let's rest him for 2 or 3 weeks and look at how much better he's going to be when he gets back. They do what they do with their roster, what they have put on the field. They draft guys that fit into their positions that they want them to, what they need them for. And they do the same thing when they set their offense and defense up. They set it up by what players are available and make them successful at the things they can do. That's why I love the staff so much. It's enlightening, and it's so nice to see from a coaching standpoint of a bunch of guys that care about their guys and going to give the guys a chance. And when they give those guys a chance, they step up and do what they need to do. So, it'd be great to have a full roster, but let's keep doing what we're doing and hopefully have a full roster by week 16 or 17.
I like the fact that you're thinking long game. That's what I'm thinking. That's what we think the Lions are thinking. And getting off to this start at 5-1 gives them that luxury of not having to rush somebody back if they don't quite think they're ready. If David Montgomery's out longer than 4 weeks, then it might be something I think the Lions need to look at a little bit closer, and we can talk to that in a minute. But that would be my only concern. If he's out 3 to 4 weeks, with Gibbs and Craig Reynolds, along with bringing Mohamed Ibrahim back in there with Ozigbo, I think we're okay. If it's going to be longer term, then you might want to look at something. Another area that I'm hoping we're getting some good news on this week would be in the defensive back area. I'm hoping Brian Branch is back because he brings so much to that secondary. And the defense did not allow a touchdown. So it was a total defensive effort last week. That being said, we're pretty thin in the secondary, and so I'm hoping that he's going to come back, and that could help shore that up a little bit.
Oh, for sure. It gives us that much more depth, puts him in the middle, puts him at that nickel safety or box safety, whatever you want to call him, whatever he lines up, and it definitely would help out with the tight end probably situation this week with Andrews. And so, we could definitely use him. But again, the guys continue to step up and make plays. We don't talk about much with, and people don't talk about is Sutton. That guy is just having a season right now, and nobody's noticing it because all these other guys. And that's the thing about, I know the opposing teams are noticing that guy. And so I think that's one of the things that I just love to watch about this team is guys continue to step up and make plays and do what's best for them. But yeah, depth would be great. But like you said, we are 5-1 right now. And, each week we've been fighting through the injury bug like all the other NFL teams, and we're having success. So let's just keep that rolling.
All right, Coach. Now, as we are talking, we got to bring this up. The trade deadline is less than 2 weeks away. Mm-hmm. And it is, I believe, the day after the Lions play the Monday night game against the Raiders. And the two positions we just talked about, running back and defensive back, are the two areas where we are probably the thinnest, and that's due to injuries, not due to talent. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are saying the Lions need to, grab a running back, trade for a running back or a defensive back. We saw them sign Mohamed Ibrahim. So they've added another running back. He's on the practice squad right now. You keep hearing names thrown out there. We heard names all off season or the beginning of the season, even about the wide receiver position. I got to believe if they're going to do something at the trade deadline, and it wouldn't fault them to do it. You saw the Rams do it. And I still firmly believe that the Rams did not get OBJ and Von Miller mid-season. They don't make the Super Bowl. So right. I understand the need to do it, but you and I have talked about this. If they did it, they're not going to necessarily go for that big splash name that everybody wants them to do. They're looking for the right piece to the puzzle, as we talked, the right fit. It could be somebody else's running back 2 or defensive back 3 or somebody that's just like a depth piece. I mean, man, you remember Justin Jackson from last year? That's not a guy a lot of people on other teams could name, but boy, was he valuable to us.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you're right. I don't think it's going to be that splash guy. It's not going to be how everybody wants us to go out and get Burns, or we need another pass rusher. We need another one of these guys. We do have guys on the injury list right now, and some of them may be coming back. Some of them are coming back. And so those are things those all come into play when you're talking about, do we need a third, another running back? Do we need to get a third string running back that can come in and carry the load if we need to? Last week we're down to 3 and 4 really. And we were successful. They didn't run the ball, but they picked up the blitzes on the pass plays. And so those are things that, you don't know. I'm going to leave that to Holmes and Campbell and the crew. They know exactly what's coming back. They know exactly what they have down the road coming off the injury report. They're going to make that decision. Is Brad Holmes looking? Oh, yeah, he's looking. He's always looking. He's always trying to make a deal. We talked about that earlier in the year. The guy's playing chess right now. And he's gonna find somebody that if he thinks they can put him, that's gonna put him over the top, or that's gonna carry the load, then he'll go after and get him. And you and I talked about it too. Does he fit the climate of the Detroit Lions?
That's the most important thing.
Yeah, I agree. And so they're going to have to do their homework on that part too. So let's wait and see how this week pans out, and going into the Monday Night Football game, and maybe we'll bring that one up again, because it may be come to a head to where we have to go get somebody.
Yeah, and we also know, we saw this offseason, if there is a splash that Brad Holmes wants to make, he will make it. I mean, we all went crazy when he signed C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and they brought him in, and it was like, wow, did not see that coming. So that just goes to show, like you said, he's always looking for the right person in the right situation. And so we don't know. And a lot can happen in the next 2 weeks. But I want to calm Lions fans a little bit who think you need to make a trade. Because, Coach, we got to talk about something you and I talked about this spring. And it seemed like the whole world was blowing up with this. And I was like, we didn't want to talk about it, but people kept talking about it. So we had to. And we said, the Detroit Lions are not going to trade for Lamar Jackson. Do you remember when everybody wanted that trade to happen?
I remember that. Yeah, we were just kind of laughing about it. Anyway.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Lamar Jackson's having a great season. He's number 10th in quarterback rating. But we talked about giving up 2 first-round picks, a $45 million contract. Oh, and by the way, what about the quarterback we had on our roster and still have, Jared Goff? He's number 4 in quarterback rating right now. Did not cost the extra money on salary cap. Oh, by the way, we got to keep those 2 first-round picks. And so in Brad, we trust, right?
I totally agree. Totally agree with that. And I think that's why those guys get paid the big money. And that's why they're, in a situation why we're 5-1 right now, and, let them go. I know we haven't had winning seasons and playoff victories and all that stuff, but let this group go, because they know what they're doing, and they have this town and state buzzing. And it's just fun to watch. I'm sorry I'm laughing so much, but my buddies from Baltimore right now are texting me because they know that this is the time where we record this, and they're going back and forth about how the Ravens are going to beat us, and they're tumbling down, and how the Ravens play down to their competition. And then he came back and said, "Oh my God, we're favored." So I said, "Yeah, so I guess you're playing down." But anyways, it's going to be a lot of fun.
There's one other area that doesn't get a whole lot of talk, and I want to talk about the kicking situation. Jack Fox, the punter, right? He got one of the game balls last week. He had an amazing kicking game, and everybody's high on him, which is great. But then everybody's really low on Riley Patterson, our field goal kicker. And I got to say, It hasn't gone in a straight line the way I thought it would, a straight line with an upward trajectory, if you will. But we've talked about this before back in the preseason. I liked him a couple years ago when he filled in for Seibert. And I was bummed we didn't have him last year. And he kicked very consistently well for Jacksonville, but didn't have a ton of range. And we went through our little mess last year with a kicker. And then we got him back, and he was not wowing in preseason by any means. And he missed a field goal this week. But he showed some leg strength, and that field goal miss wasn't by much. And so I guess the other thing I want to point out there is, and I could be wrong on this, but I've got hope for Riley Patterson. And I think the Lions are starting to trust him more, because a couple weeks back, they might not have tried to kick that 52-yard field goal. Coach, what do you make of the kicking situation with the Lions?
Again, I don't, last week, I read a Twitter account. Oh my God, why did we have him kick that? We should have went for it. Now they're mad because we didn't go for it on fourth down. And then the other people are mad because we do go on fourth down. I'm not concerned with that. I think that the biggest thing is his accuracy and stuff is good enough to get us to where we need to get. And the Lions know that. They're going to set him up. Why did he kick that field goal last week? Because they wanted to see what his leg strength was. They wanted to see if he was going to push it or pull it. They wanted to set it up for week 16 if we come down to that. Is he going to miss a field goal of that distance again? No. And I mean, that's just the thing is, there's maybe there are better kickers out there, but we have the best one that we can have right now, and we got to run with them. And I feel confident with him kicking the ball, within his realm, within his wheelhouse.
Yeah, and you know what? He's not Eddie Murray. He's not Jason Hansen. He's not Matt Prater. He's none of those guys. We have been very fortunate with that. But you know what? Did you see that? Did you see the first kicker in the draft last year, Jake Moody from Michigan? What did he do this past week? He missed a game-winning field goal. Yes, he's a rookie. He was a highly heralded rookie. And so those things happen.
Yep. That's part of the game, and we'll see. We're going to ride with it. He's part of the team, and I think everybody likes him. And as long as they like him and the staff likes him, and he fits the mold, he's going to stick with us.
There we go. I'm optimistic. We'll see what happens. But the Lions are back on the road. What do we expect on the road? Will there be a Lions crowd? You saw that crowd in Tampa. That was pretty incredible. And I think the only way to help make a crowd bigger and help support it is to actually put yourself in that crowd, Coach. So I'm going to the game this weekend in Baltimore.
You are, no kidding. And I got picked up some tickets too. So I'm flying out Saturday morning.
You're going to the game too.
I'm going to the game too. My wife talked me into it, but I'm going by myself. So I was, like I said, I got my best friends out there, and his sons are out there. They're huge Raven fans. Good friend of mine is a assistant special teams coach for the Ravens. And, it's kind of one of the bucket list things, kind of been a Raven fan on the backside, from the Reed and that really terrible linebacker they had and those days. But, I think John Harbaugh is a great coach. And so it's going to be fun. And, you and I talked about, man, is this going to be fun this week? We're both going to the game and we get to do a pregame on it. So I think you and I both decided we want to be part of the largest traveling crowd of any sports team in the NFL. And so we're definitely going to be a part of it.
I have a group of friends that live out that way. I've got one from Grand Rapids as well that's flying out. I went to the University of Maryland for my undergraduate, so it'll be fun to get back out there. And you mentioned it. I'm going to give their name right out here. The horse you came in on, an establishment in Baltimore, is actually hosting a Saturday night viewing of the Michigan MSU game. And I think there's going to be a lot of Lions fans at that. That's what I've been seeing on social media. So that could be a Saturday night preview or pregame to the big Sunday of festival.
Yeah, definitely gonna hit that. Just because we're gonna be amongst all those Raven fans, and they travel well too, even though they're home. But and I'm also going to be tailgating at a Ravens tailgate. So. But I probably won't have any of my Lions stuff on.
Hopefully you're wearing not the same old Lions podcast shirt around them.
That T-shirt's underneath the pullover with my leather jacket, and I'm going to have my leather helmet on as well as my Lions stocking cap. So we're gonna make sure they notice us and they're gonna hear us. So I'm looking forward to the bantering back and forth with some of these crazy Raven fans that my nephew told me that not to take offense to them because they get out of hand.
Well, we'll have to find each other somewhere in the stadium or outside the stadium and meet up for sure. As we're running out of time here, Coach, it's time to get to predictions. Now, if we thought last week was a test, I think this one is even more of a test. And we've done the could win, the should win. I know you don't predict the winner since the Seattle game, and I heard somebody else say the exact same thing. And before the season started, I thought this would be one of their tougher games on the schedule. And again, I went could win, should win. But before the season, I said there isn't a game the Lions can't win. There isn't, and there still isn't. So this probably would have been in the could win category because it's a road game against a good team. And I think the Lions are going to be tested again this time. They were last week, especially with their two top running backs out last week. Hopefully Jahmyr Gibbs is back in this week. Coach, do you have any predictions for this game?
Well, I think the biggest thing is we're definitely going to be there and we're going to show up. My nephew Nick and Jake and my buddy Willie were just saying that, the Ravens have put together a roster to beat all 31 teams in the NFL. We have done the same. So I think this is going to be definitely the toughest game we played all year. As of right now, I think we'll establish the run. I know we will score in the red zone, and Goff is one of the best quarterbacks if you're going to play man-to-man coverage on him. So I think that's the thing is we're going to show up. We're definitely going to put them to the test. I will tell you one thing: the Ravens are a 2.5 to 3 point favorite. I think that's a bad prediction, but that's okay if that's how the bookies want to put it. So, and we're gonna shoot to go 1-0 this week, and we'll move on after that. I know one thing I can predict. Dan Campbell will not have a $5 bill in his pocket this week because I love that stuff. I'm sorry, because he wanted to pull out the 5 and then he pulled out the 5 fingers. But I'm hoping he has the one hand in one pocket and the other hand in the other, and he comes out with a 5 and a 1 for number 6.
That would be awesome. Or even maybe 3 $2 bills somehow. I love the $2 bill.
Ooh, I like it. Okay, we can do that.
Last week you said the Lions would face adversity in Tampa, and they did. Their top running back went down in a tie game, and they had to adjust, and Craig Reynolds came up with a huge play along with Amon-Ra St. Brown on the same one. We haven't even talked about Jamison Williams in this show. He came through and made a great catch. I mean, that first catch in his career for a touchdown was nice, but he was wide open. That last one was contested in a tight ball game. I think the Lions are going to face adversity, perhaps the most adversity they have faced so far this season. Obviously, you could argue the second game of the season against Seattle had a ton as well because they did lose that game. But I think they're going to be tested in this one, and it's going to take a really good effort to pull out a victory. And I'm hoping, like you, we go 1-0 this week.
Yes, great call. And I did not talk about the third quarter, which was better last week, and I think it'll be better this week also.
Awesome. Folks, if you're going to the game, we hope to see you there. Coach, thanks so much for joining the show again. It's always a pleasure and a lot of fun this year talking Detroit Lions.
Oh, for sure. And this week's a little special because not only will we talk about them through a Zoom meeting, but we'll be talking about them in the parking lot, maybe at that establishment that we talked about, and definitely in the stadium. It's going to be a lot of fun, Matt.
Yes, it will. And folks, the next show, our recap usually comes out on Sunday night or Monday morning. Not sure what that timeline's looking like just because we'll be traveling back from the game on Sunday night. So if it doesn't come out Sunday, look for it Monday night into Tuesday morning. Thank you so much for tuning in, folks. You can find all the episodes at notthesameoldlions.com. If you're listening on YouTube, please hit that like button. And while you're at it, tell your friends about the show and please subscribe regardless of your listening platform. Until next time, stay gritty, my friends.